Hello, your resident nerd is here to read you a story from here. This book that I got, which Barney bought me. And so I just thought I'd read you the tale of Isis and Osiris and Ra and the secret name of Ra from this book. Bear with me if I fuck up. I might do. I'm reading it and trying to talk to you at the same time. But I hope you enjoy it. And if you do, then let me know. I might read you some others from it too. So, the story of Osiris, Isis, Ra, and his secret name. While Ra yet ruled in Egypt as the first pharaoh, Thoth, the god of wisdom and magic, whom he had created at the beginning of the world, uttered a prophecy. If Nut, the lady of the heavens, bears a son, he will one day rule in Egypt, said Thoth. Nut shall never bear a son. Nor any children at all, said Ra angrily. No child of Nut shall take my throne from me. In fact, no one shall at all. Lo, I lay this curse upon her. She shall give birth to no child in any day of any year. No, nor even in any night time either. I have spoken, and what I decree can never be altered. Nut was heartbroken at this. Yet Thoth had said that her son should rule in Egypt, and he was the wisest of all the gods. So often his prophecies were never wrong. So she went to Thoth, who loved her dearly, and begged for his aid. Grant me your love, and I will show you how your wish may be fulfilled, and yet we shall make sure that Ra's curse remains unbroken, said Thoth. Nut consented readily to this, and Thoth soon devised a very clever scheme. He visited Khonshu, the moon god, and challenged him to a game of draughts. Khonshu was a great gambler, and soon the stakes were very high indeed, especially for the moon himself, for he was wagering his own light. He had no chance of beating clever Thoth, however, who went on playing and winning until he had run enough of the moon's light from Khonshu to make 5 extra days. These days he decided to fit in between the end of the old year and the beginning of the new. Before this, there had only been 360 days in the year, but now there were 365. Moreover, since that great game of draughts, the moon has not had enough light to shine full throughout each month, so he dwindles down into darkness and slowly comes to his full glory again. But now, with these 5 extra days, he laid them at the feet of Nut. And on these days, Nut's children were born. Osiris upon the first, Hamaris upon the second, Set upon the third, Isis upon the fourth, and Nephthys on the 5th. When Osiris was born, there were many signs and many wonders. A great voice from the heaven was heard crying, "The Lord of all comes forth into the light." A woman drawing water at the well was suddenly seized by the spirit of prophecy and cried aloud, "Osiris the king is born!" And then, in Thebes, a certain man called Pamles heard a voice coming from the temple of Ra, which bade him proclaim that the birth of Egypt's greatest king, Osiris, the saviour of mankind, is born. By the advice of Thoth, Nut entrusted the baby Osiris to Pamles to be brought up, but Thoth himself instructed both Osiris and Isis in all of the wisdom of the gods and the hidden lore of which he was master. Isis learnt so quickly, and all persuaded Khonshu to teach her the mysteries of the moon too, and so she became the greatest magician Egypt had ever known. When they were grown up, Isis and Osiris married. Nephthys married Set, and following their example, the human pharaohs forever married their own sisters afterwards. Though most of them had many other wives, the sister bride was always queen. Isis was not yet queen, however, nor Osiris king, for Ra still ruled on earth as the pharaoh of Egypt. Though in his human form he now grew older and older, his head shook with the palsy of extreme old age, and he dribbled at the mouth. Wise Isis pondered in her heart how she might end the reign of Ra upon earth so that Osiris could become king. The wisdom which Thoth had taught her, that only learning Ra's hidden name could she actually gain power over him. The witchcraft of the moon which Khonshu had shown her suggested a dark scheme to her heart. All living things were made by Ra, and without him no new creature could be created. Yet Isis somehow managed to make the first cobra. This is called the Uraeus, and it has become sacred in the land of Egypt. As Ra passed his way each morning to visit the upper and lower lands of Egypt, he dribbled at the mouth. And his spittle fell in the dust by the roadside. Isis gathered together that moist clay, and so fashioned and made it into the likeness of a hooded snake. She set it in the fiery poison of midnight magic, and she hid it in the grass beside the way Ra was accustomed to take. The next day he stepped out to view his kingdom, and the glorious light of Ra's eye fell upon the cobra that Isis had fashioned, and gave it life. The cobra reared its head out of the grass, bit Ra in the heel, and slipped away out of sight. For a little while, Ra was speechless. Then, as pain shot through him like fire, he uttered a great cry which rang through all of the land of Egypt. At once the gods and goddesses came hastening to him, Isis among them, and said, "What is it? What is it that troubles you, maker of God and men? What ails you so?" "Something has wounded me," cried Ra, "yet my heart does not know it, and my eyes have not seen it, my hand did not make it. I who have made all things, do not recognize this. Therefore let the children of gods be brought before me, those who know magic spells, those whose wisdom reaches to the heavens. Maybe one of them can help me." So, one by one, the gods and their children came before Ra, but none of them could help him, and ever the pain of the cobra's bite grew fiercer and fiercer. At last it was the turn of Isis. She knelt humbly before Ra and said, "What is it, divine father? What is it that has stabbed you? Is it some snake from amongst those that you have made? Has it lifted its head against you? If so, I shall cast it down. With my magic I shall cast it. I shall make it hide its head from the sight of your divine eyes." And then Ra said, As I went on my way, as I walked between the two lands of Egypt, to look upon all I have created, I was bitten by a snake that I did not see, by a serpent I did not make, with a poison that I do not know. It is not fire, it is neither water, yet one moment I am colder than water, and the next I am more than fire. Now my body is sweating, and now I am shivering, and my eyes are clouded, and I cannot see, and my head burns with the fierce beams of midsummer. Isis bowed her head before Ra and spoke softly. "Divine Father, I can cure this grievous poison. Tell me your secret name, for only I can cure it if I know that name and mingle it with my spells." And then Ra spoke in turn, the many, many, many names by which he was worshipped, the names that told of all that he had made, the heavens and the earth, the sea, the mysteries of the two horizons, the darkness and of the light, and of the great river Nile, and all living creatures, and all else besides that. "Yes," he ended, "I am Khepera in the dawning, I am Ra at noon, and I am Tum when the shadows fall over the earth." But the poison was still running unchecked through his veins, and as Isis spoke one name after another, she said again, "Divine Father, your secret name is not among those you have told me. Tell me that name, and the poison shall come forth. He whose name of power is spoken in my charm shall make sure that he lives to see the next day." The poison burned fiercer yet, and it was more powerful than the hottest flame of fire, and Ra cried out, Swear first that you shall tell none of my secret name, save only Horus, the son you will bear to Osiris. Horus, who shall rule Egypt when Osiris has passed westward into the land of the dead. Promise me." Isis swore the oath, and the secret name passed from Ra's heart into hers. The name she learnt was not Amen, nor has it ever been known, but Amen seems to have been, as it were, the body, the container of the secret name of Ra, for it was as Amen-Ra that the greatest of the gods came to be worshipped, for thousands of years ever afterwards in ancient Egypt. Once she knew the secret name, Isis mingled the knowledge with her spell and chanted, "Flow forth, poison of cobra, flow forth from Amen-Ra, come from the bird my spell, for he hath shown me his hidden name. Ra is the living, and the poison is dead. Though the spells of Isis, the mistress of gods, she alone who knows Amen-Ra by his name." And then the pain of the serpent's poison faded away, and Ra felt it no more. But nevertheless he ceased to reign as a king upon earth, and took his place finally as the heavens. By day he crossed over from the east to the west in the likeness of the sun itself, and night by night he passed under the earth through the 12 regions of the Duat, which the spirit of the dead must also pass if they would be to win into Ra's eternal kingdom. As soon as Ra had taken his place in the heavens, Osiris became pharaoh of Egypt, with Isis as his queen. They built the great city of Thebes as their capital, and ruled well and ruled wisely. When Osiris came to the throne, the Egyptians were cannibals, and lived more like wild animals than human beings. All this he and Isis altered very soon, teaching mankind how to sow and reap, both wheat and barley to make bread, how to grow various fruits such as the date and the grape for food and for wine, how to make laws, how to live in peace under them, how to do honour to the gods and build temples for them, first and the greatest being that of Amun-Ra at Thebes. As soon as the land of the Upper Egypt as far as Thebes had learnt all the arts and peace of civilization, Osiris left Isis to rule over it, and set out to teach the men and women in more distant parts of Egypt. He took no army with him, but only a band of priests and musicians, and even the wildest tribes hearkened to his kindly words, and were won over by the sweet sounds of his music. But not all men, even in Egypt, followed Osiris. There was evil awake in the world, to strive against good, and in Egypt that evil found its leader in Set, the younger brother of Osiris and Isis. Set would have rebelled and seized the throne while Osiris was away from Egypt on his mission, but Isis kept such a good watch that he knew he would have no success against her. So he pretended to be a faithful and loyal subject, a loving brother to the pharaoh and to his queen. But he gathered secretly to him 72 wicked men, all of whom were ready to join in a conspiracy against Osiris, and to them he added Assos, the queen of Ethiopia, who was on a visit to the court of Thebes. As soon as Osiris returned, Set invited him to a great feast which he had prepared in honour of his brother. Suspecting nothing, Osiris came unattended, and was welcomed by Set and his 72 companions. It was a very splendid feast, during which each of the guests vied with each other to do honour to Osiris. At last, as it was drawing to a close, Set said, "We have all paid our tributes of praise to my beloved brother, the good god Pharaoh Osiris. Now, to end the feast, I have a gift for one of my guests, but this time I do not know who it will be." Set clapped his hands, and the servants brought forth into the hall the most beautiful chest of cedar wood from Lebanon, and inlaid with ebony from Ethiopia, inlaid with gold and with silver and with ivory and with lapis lazuli and with precious stones. It was exquisite. When it was placed in the midst of the guests, the servants retired, and the doors to the hall were shut. Set spoke again. "Here is my gift to one of my guests. It shall be he who fits most perfectly into the chest that shall claim it as theirs." All were admiring its beauty with cries of delight, and now they began one by one to see how well each one of them fitted into it. But some were too tall, and some were too short, and some were too fat, and others too thin. "Let me try," said Osiris at last. He stepped into the chest and lay down. And of course, it fitted him perfectly, for Set had secretly obtained his exact measurements and made sure it was to fit. "It's mine!" cried Osiris gaily. "See, it fits me like the skin I was born in!" And in so saying, Set slammed down the lid. With feverish haste, he and his evil companions nailed the top tightly, filled every crack with molten lead, and cast it secretly into the Nile. It was the time of inundation, and the swift waters hurried out through the delta into the sea near the city of Tanis. Away it went over the waves until it came at last to the city of Bavlos in Syria, the oldest city in the world. There a great wave lifted it over the shingle and cast it into the heart of a young tamarisk tree growing near the shore. Speedily it clasped it with its branches, and grew round it until the chest was completely hidden in its trunk. Of all the trees, this tamarisk was the fairest, with lovely blossoms and sweetly scented woods. Very soon it became famous throughout the whole land of Syria, more famous even than the great cedars on Mount Lebanon. Presently the fame of the tree brought Maclander, the king of that land, to see it, with his wife, Queen Astarte. And it seemed to them so wonderful that Maclander had it cut down, and a pillar fashioned out of its trunk. He laid it in his palace in the place of honour, and all men marvelled at the beauty of the woods and its fragrance, and none knew that it held the body of a god. Meanwhile, Isis had learnt what had happened, and set out in search of the body of Osiris, for until the proper funeral rites were performed, his spirit could not be free to enter the Duat, the land of the dead. So first of all she went to the island of Chemis, in the streams of the Nile Delta, and there, tended by Buto, the kindly goddess of Lower Egypt, her son Horus was born to her. When she could travel, Isis set out once more in search of the body of her husband. She left Horus in the care of Buto, and as a further safeguard against Set, she loosened the island of Chemis from its foundations and set it afloat, sometimes on the Nile, sometimes on the sea itself, so that Set might not find it and may not find Horus. Then she cut her hair in a token of mourning, and went hither and thither on a search throughout the land of Egypt. At first she had no success, but presently she found a group of children who had been playing, and had seen a beautifully decorated chest floating down the Nile near Tanis, and heading for the great green sea. Asking the children at their games along the seashore, Isis followed the chest until she came at last to Byblos, and by then only her magic was able to show her where the body of Osiris was. Isis sat on the shore at Byblos, in the likeness of an old woman, and when Queen Astarte's serving maids came down to the sea to wash their clothes and bathe in the waves, Isis spoke kindly to them, and taught them how to braid their hair, for no one before this had ever been taught how to twist their hair into plaits, and twine it on their heads with flowers and leaves as ornaments. And when they returned to the palace, Astarte asked her maids where they had learnt this new art, and they told her of the dignified old woman who sat on the rock by the sea. Full of curiosity, Astarte bade them to bring her to the palace. When Isis came, Astarte realised that here was a stranger of no ordinary kind, though she thought her no more than a woman filled with the wisdom for which Egypt was already famous. So she welcomed her in, and begged her to dwell in the palace and to tend her little son, the prince, a delicate baby who seemed likely, sadly, to die. Isis nursed him so well that day by day he grew and became stronger and stronger in a way that seemed more than natural. Astarte was curious, the more so because her maids told her that each night the strange new nurse would turn them out of the room and lock the door. Then they would hear her heap up the fire, and after that there was a long silence broken only by the sounds of the twittering of a swallow. So Astarte decided that she would hide herself in the room one night, and presently she saw Isis turning out the serving maids, barring up the door and heaping up the fire. When the fire was burning fiercely, Isis made a glowing red space between the logs, took the baby prince, and placed him within the fire. Immediately she turned herself into a swallow, and flew around and around and around the pillar which held the body of Osiris, twittering mournfully. With a scream, Astarte rushed forward, and snatched the baby prince out of the fire, to find that he was quite unharmed by it, and indeed began to cry indignantly at being plucked so suddenly from such a warm and comfortable bed. Full of fear, Astarte turned to flee, clutching her child in her arms, but instead she sank to the floor and hid her eyes, for Isis stood before her in her full, beautiful goddess glory. "Foolish woman!" cried Isis. "You had but left your son to my care, I would have burned away all that was human in him, and made him one of the gods, even as I am. But now he will die when old age comes to him, as all men do, if, indeed, death does not come to him sooner." Again and again King Maclander and Queen Astarte knelt before Isis, begging her to forgive them, offering all the riches of Byblos, and if she would continue to tend to their son. "That I cannot do," said Isis, "but I will leave you my blessing on you if you wish, and if you give me what yonder pillar contains." Then the king sent for his workmen, and the pillar was taken down and split open. Inside rested the coffin of Osiris, and when this had been lifted, Isis poured perfume on the pillar and said, "Place this in your most sacred temple, and it will bring pilgrims to Byblos for many years, for this wood this wood has held the body of a god. So the people of Bablos built a temple in which they set the wooden pillar, and it became known as the Temple of Bablat, the Lady of Bablos, and the remains of which can be seen to this day. Isis set the coffin on a boat and sailed away from Byblos. When she was passing the mouth of the river Phaedros, the current flowed so strongly that it seemed about to drive the ship out. So in a moment of anger, Isis cast a spell on the river and dried up the water. When the ship was sailing gently over the sea once more in the direction of Egypt, Isis bade all leave her by herself. She went to the cabin and she opened the coffin. But the prince of Bablos, who commanded her escort, Manoros, was so filled with curiosity that he hid in the cabin too. He peeped over her shoulder at what was in the coffin, and Isis felt his presence, and turning gave him one glance, one awful, awful look of anger, and he fell dead to the floor. When the ship reached Egypt, Isis guided it to where the floating island of Chemis was waiting for her, and bade the sailors to set the coffin on the shore. As soon as this was done, she stood beside it. She bade the sailors row home to Bablos as fast as they could, and she sent a wind to help them on their way. But she herself floated up the Nile on the island, where Buto was still guarding the infant Horus, and hid among the reeds of the delta until she could perform the funeral rites of Osiris. However, her quest was by no means at an end, for on the very next night Set and his followers came hunting through the darkness and through the moonlight, for Set best loved the hours of darkness when evil things wander the earth. As ill luck would have it, he came to the island of Chemis, that seemed to now be part of the firm earth again. Isis hid with Horus deep down among the reeds and escaped his notice, but Set had seen the chest, which had become the coffin of Osiris, and at once he recognised its exquisite facade. With a great howl of rage he snatched up the body of his murdered brother out of the chest and tore it into 14 pieces. He scattered them far and wide all over the land of Egypt. "It seems hard to destroy the body of a god," he cried. "Yet now I have destroyed Osiris, and kept his spirit out of the duat." He went on his way laughing manically, and Isis crept out of her hiding place, entrusted Horus once more to Buto, and set out again in search of the pieces of her husband's body. As she rowed hither and thither on the Nile, her boat made of papyrus, the very crocodiles took pity on her and let her pass. And ever since then it's said that anyone sailing on the Nile in a papyrus boat has been safe from the crocodiles, because they think that it is still Isis searching for the body of her lost husband. Isis found all but one piece, which had fallen into the Nile and been eaten for certain by the fishes who were cursed ever afterwards. But the other pieces she found, and with the help of Anubis, the son of Set and Nephthys, who took the shape of a wild dog in order to help her better search. Fearing Set should desecrate even the tomb of Osiris, Isis buried him in 13 different places, where she had found the pieces of his body, making up a complete body out of her magic in each place, so that a great funeral rite might be performed. And for this reason, the 13 cities of Egypt all boasted that they held the burial place of Osiris. Yet some say that in her fear of Set, Isis deceived even the high priests and the people of the 13 cities by burying the whole body of Osiris, adding the one missing piece by magic, on the holy island of Philae, beyond the first cataracts above Elephantine. And they proved this by the fact that in later years the most sacred oath an Egyptian could swear by was, "By him who sleeps at Philae." Well, whatever his earthly burial, once it was accomplished, the spirit of Osiris passed into the duat, and there he became the king of the dead, welcoming all those who are to be judged by death, and found worthy to enter his kingdom. He would add them to the army of the blessed, with whom it was said he would return to reign on earth after his last great battle with Set. I hope you enjoyed that. If you're wondering what the piece that's missing is, it's his dick. Yeah. Osiris, was resurrected. Will be resurrected, apparently penisless, which is grand. But yeah, the story goes that when he was split into all those pieces, the one that couldn't be found was his penis. And it's just really interesting. It's got loads of implications later down the line in terms of symbolism of Osiris too. So there you go. That was a really weird angle to be at. yeah, alright, I hope you enjoyed that, because that was kind of longer than I was anticipating it being. But yeah, anyway, thanks for listening. Yeah, chat to me about it if you want to, because I love that story so much, and it's like so fucking biblical and so like. Ooh, yeah. Also, did you notice like 300? There were 365 days, and then he's born on he's born on Christmas. He's born on Christmas Day. Anyway, I ain't getting into it, but yeah.